Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to give us a few more minutes for others to come in, and we will get started. Just waiting a few more moments, and we will get started. Okay. All right. Well, good morning. I think we can go ahead and get started with our webinar for today. Good morning, and welcome to our training on understanding 504 and more. There's a lot to know about a 504 plan, which comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance. This webinar will give you an understanding of the history of Section 504, the difference between a 504 and an IEP, as well as determining eligibility under Section 504 and its purpose. I'm going to ask you to complete an evaluation at the end of our training. You'll see it pop up. The evaluation results helps us improve trainings and demonstrate the need for continued funding to provide these types of trainings free of charge. The evaluation, again, will pop up at the end of the presentation, so please take a few moments to fill that out for us. If at any time you lose audio, you may call in using the phone number you received in your invite when you received through email after you registered. And feel free to submit questions in the chat box or wait till the end, but we will have my executive director, Chanel Jackson, monitoring the chat box and helping us there. I am Zandra Ashley, your presenter for today's webinar. I am one of the education specialists for Families Helping Families Region 7. Families Helping Families Region 7 is one of 10 nonprofit family resource centers in the Families Helping Families network of centers. We are here to provide support to parents of children, youth, and adults with disabilities or special health care needs. We do this through individual assistance, information sharing, outreach, and trainings. As the education specialist, my role is to support individuals with disabilities and exceptionalities in advocating for education rights, provide guidance with IEPs, referrals, parent support groups, and workshops. If you have any questions about our services, feel free to contact us. Families Helping Families Region 7 provides webinars and trainings on special education and disability related topics. And we invite you to check out our calendar of events on Facebook and more information at www.fhfregion7.com, and check it regularly and register for any upcoming trainings that might be of interest to you. You can also join our mailing list by submitting your email address on our website to receive our emails and constantly be informed. We also invite you to request specific training that is currently not being offered, because chances are, if you are interested in a specific topic, I'm sure someone else is too. So let's get started. But first, I want to start with a quick icebreaker activity. So I will ask a question, and I ask that you please put your response in the chat box, and my executive director, Chanel Jackson, will share your responses. So the icebreaker question is, did you get any Louisiana snow last week? And are you hoping for snow this coming week? I'll start by giving my response. I did not receive any snow, and my feelings was hurt. I didn't get any on my side of town, but I am hoping for snow on Wednesday. I have wood ready to burn. How about you, Chanel?
I did not get any snow, just cold weather, which I appreciated, but it would be nice to see some snow.
Yes.
All right,
How
and
about you
so
guys?
yeah, it would be nice. So the answers in the chat is, well, as long as it doesn't have us snowed in too long.
Right. I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
so Kelly said no, but she's hoping for next week.
Yes.
Wallace said no, maybe next week, not sure.
I hope so. I
Um,
really no.
yeah. Brittany said, I'm hoping for snow this week. No snow so far.
I know. I know. It would be nice.
Ramonda didn't receive any snow, but hoping that we get some this year. So no
Yes.
one received snow. I guess it was just in Texas.
Yeah, see, and I saw where Benton had a few flurries, but I was waiting, and I have my wood ready. So I really hope it does, and I'm glad that we all agree we want snow. Okay. Well, thank you for participating. Well, Christmas break is over, and school is back in session. I don't know about you, but my kids and I hit the ground running day one. Our babies are back in the classroom, and as always, meeting their needs are our top priority. You may find yourself asking, what does my child need? What may help them in their challenges? Well, Families Helping Families provide several trainings on individual education programs and IEPs, and information on IDEA law as it relates to special education services, and so much more. But what if my child needs help in the general education classroom? What if my child only needs a few accommodations to help them focus or stay on track? All children identified with a disability do not necessarily require special education and related services. When a child is having trouble in school, it is always important to find out why. By law, schools must provide special help to eligible children with disabilities. It's important to provide students with appropriate help. I hope this training on understanding 504 and more provides you insight. Here are our learning goals for today. Understanding the difference between 504 and other special education services, the process used to determine eligibility, how to access services and how services are implemented, how 504 and Bulletin 1508 might help students with disabilities, how 504 and Bulletin 1508 might help students with disabilities who may struggle in school, accommodations, and what services are best for your students. First, we will look at some frequently used acronyms in special education. So let's get started. Throughout this presentation, you will hear me use these acronyms, and I try my best to define them on the spot and let you know what they mean. And sometimes I slip up and forget, but I want to make sure that you know what these acronyms are and what they stand for, because it's important for you to get accustomed to the acronyms that are used in education. Also, so you will feel more confident at these IEP meetings, 504 meetings, um, conferences with the teachers, any meeting where we speak in what we like to call alphabet soup. So we have IDEA, and this is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal special education law. IEP, which we hear so often, and that is the individualized education plan your child might have in school. This is also where most transition services are located. 504, this law prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in programs or activities that receive federal funding, which we will be discussing today. ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which protects people with disabilities from discrimination. SBLC, and that is the School Building Level Committee, a regular education committee that is charged with deciding if a student needs to be referred to pupil appraisal for an evaluation. RTI, Response to Intervention, which is a 3-tiered program to use either before or during the evaluation of a student, and we will discuss that more in depth today as well. FAPE, which is Free Appropriate Public Education. OCR, that is the Office for Civil Rights. Their mission is to ensure equal access to education and to promote educational excellence through vigorous enforcement of civil rights in our nation's schools. We have the Rehabilitation Act, and that is a federal law that protects people with disabilities from discrimination and authorizes programs to help them. And Bulletin 1508. This is the regulatory guide for pupil appraisal when conducting individual evaluations for students suspected of being exceptional and in need of special education and related services. I first want to touch on a bit of history. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark civil rights decision in Brown versus Board of Education. In Brown, school children from 4 states argued that segregated public schools were inherently unequal and deprived them of equal protection under the law. The Supreme Court found that African American children had the right to equal educational opportunities and that segregated schools have no place in the field of public education. Parents of children with disabilities recognize that their children should have the same civil rights. So, after the decision in Brown, parents of children with disabilities began to bring lawsuits against their school districts for excluding and segregating children with disabilities. The parents argued that by excluding these children, schools were discriminating against the children because of their disabilities. The civil rights movement of the 1960s gave birth to disability rights. In 1972, Congress launched an investigation into the status of children with disabilities and found that millions of children were not receiving an appropriate education. Congress was so moved by the results, they issued a statement which included this quote: "The long range implications of these statistics are that public agencies and taxpayers will spend billions of dollars over the lifetimes of these individuals to maintain such persons as dependents and in a minimally acceptable lifestyle. With appropriate education services, many would be able to become productive citizens, contributing to society instead of being forced to remain burdens. Others, through such services, would increase their independence, thus reducing their dependence on society." In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was signed into law by President Richard Nixon on September 26, 1973. And this was the first federal law in the United States to address civil rights for people with disabilities. Section 504 of this act prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in any federal funded or conducted program or activity. This includes federal employment, federal agencies, programs that receive federal financial assistance, and the employment practices of federal contractors. Section 504 also applies to publicly funded workforce services, such as those provided by American Job Centers. In 1975, Congress enacted Public Law 94-142, also known as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975. Congress intended that all children with disabilities would have a right to education and to establish a process by which state and local educational agencies may be held accountable for providing educational services for all handicapped children. Initially, the law focused on ensuring that children with disabilities had access to an education and due process of law. Congress included an elaborate system of legal checks and balances, and these checks and balances are called procedural safeguards. They are designed to protect the rights of children and their parents. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, became law. The ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in many areas of public life, including job, schools, transportation, and many public and private places that are open to the general public. All right, so let's take a deeper dive into what Section 504 is exactly. What are rights under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act as contrasted with the rights under the IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? And how does that look in the classroom? Section 504 does not require public schools to provide a special education program that is individualized to meet the needs of a child with a disability, with the goal of enabling the child to become independent or self-sufficient. A Section 504 plan does not have the legal protections available to the child who has an IEP under IDEA. There is a difference. Except for accessibility of buildings and modifications and accommodations, which we will discuss as well, in testing, Section 504 provides fewer protections and benefits to children with disabilities than the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The key portion of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act states, no otherwise qualified individual with a disability in the United States, as defined in Section 705(20) of this title, shall, solely by reason of his or her disability, be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, under any program or activity conducted by any executive agency or by the United States Postal Service. Yes, Section 504 extends to individuals with disabilities beyond the classroom and the school. Section 504 is a broad civil rights law. The law applies to students and other individuals with disabilities, parents, and also the school district employees. The purpose is to protect individuals with disabilities. Now, I've mentioned IDEA, IEP, and I know you're wondering, what is the difference between the two? Which would my child qualify for? And how are they implemented in the classroom? We will touch briefly on the difference between an IEP and a 504. What is an IEP? It is an individualized education program that lays out a program of special education instruction. It sets forth, supports, and related services that the student needs to make progress and thrive in school. It is a detailed plan containing goals, measurable outcomes, details of modified instruction, and timelines for those measurable outcomes. A 504 plan is different. It is a different method for students with disabilities to get the supports they need in the general education classroom. It's a blueprint for how the school can provide support and remove barriers for a student with a disability. Students who may not qualify for an IEP may get the support and accommodation they need through a 504 plan. These are two different laws there are two different laws that back up IEP and a 504 plan. An IEP falls under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And again, IDEA is a federal education law requiring school districts to offer free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, in the least restrictive environment. There are 13 disability categories under the IDEA, and special and specific learning disabilities are one of them. A 504 plan comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And this is a federal rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance. Under Section 504, the child with a disability may receive accommodations and modifications that are not available to non-disabled children. All children with disabilities who receive special education and related services under IDEA are entitled to these accommodations, modifications, and services as well. So here is a visual for those different components, and we can take a look at the two. So you have the 504 plan, which are changes in the environment, like taking tests in a quiet place, changes in instruction, like checking in frequently on key concepts, changes to how the curriculum is presented, like getting outlines of lessons. An IEP is more complex and detailed. It will contain a statement of the student's present levels of academic achievement and performance, a statement of measurable annual goals, including academic and functional goals, a description of how the student's progress towards meeting the annual goals will be measured and when reports on the progress will be made, a statement of the special education and related services and supplementary aids to be provided to the student, and a statement of the program modifications or supports for school personnel that will be provided for the student. And in the middle, we have the difference between the two laws, the governing law, overseeing agency, ages covered under the 504 and the IEP. So you can take a look and see the difference there. A 504 plan is geared toward ensuring a student has equitable access to a learning environment. An IEP focuses on educational benefits, and we'll go over this over and over again, and often includes direct services such as speech or occupational therapy. Both are free to you. Some students have both an IEP and a 504. I'm not sure if you knew that. And some just have one or the other. 504 plans are typically available to students with a broader range of disabilities, including attention deficit disorders. IEPs, again, are available to students with one of the 13 specific criteria, such as orthopedic impairments or intellectual disabilities. And schools will evaluate a student to determine whether they qualify for an IEP or a 504 plan. Parents can pay for private evaluations, although schools aren't required to adopt recommendations that come from private reports. To get an IEP plan, a student's disability must interfere with their ability to fully benefit from the general education curriculum, meaning that they need specialized instruction. To get a 504 plan, a student's disability must hinder their ability to learn in a general education classroom without accommodations. It does not include specialized instruction. A 504 plan can help a student thrive in a general education classroom with minimal disruption in their education, and it can be tailored to each education environment, such as art class or PE, that the student experiences throughout the day. So let's talk eligibility. Who qualifies for a 504 plan? Section 504 defines an individual with a disability broadly as any person who has a physical or mental impairment, which substantially limits one or more of such person's major life activities. Two, has a record of such an impairment. Or three, is regarded as having such an impairment. What does this mean? To understand whether your child qualifies under this definition, it is helpful to break down the key terms used, that is, impairment, substantially limits, and major life activity. So let's do that. First, how do you know if your child has a qualifying impairment? Well, Congress did not give us an exhaustive list of conditions or disorders that may qualify as impairments, since this would be an impossibly long list. Individual, case by case determinations should and must be made. However, Congress did say that generally an impairment is defined as any physiological disorder or condition, cosmetic disfigurement, or anatomical loss affecting one or more of the following body systems: neurological, musculoskeletal, special sense organs, respiratory, including speech organs, cardiovascular, reproductive, digestive, urinary, lymphatic, skin, or any mental or physiological disorder, such as organic brain syndrome, emotional or mental illness, and specific learning disabilities. So, how do you know if your child's impairment substantially limits them? Well, Congress has not given a specific definition for what it means to be substantially limited, but the United States Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, known as the OCR, oversees enforcement of Section 504 and provides guidance on how to understand Section 504's requirements. According to OCR, the Office for Civil Rights, the determination of substantial limitation must be made on a case by case basis with respect to each individual student. It is not based on a generalized view. The Section 504 regulatory provision of 34 CFR 104.35C requires that a group of knowledgeable persons draw upon information from a variety of sources in making this determination. Thus, the team at your child's school should consider information about your child and his or her disability from a variety of sources, such as doctors, teachers, family members, other agency representatives who work with your child. In determining whether your child is substantially limited by their impairment. All right, now how do you know if your child's impairment substantially limits them in a major life activity? Congress has provided many examples of major life activities, but the provided list is not exhaustive. An activity or function not listed on this list can still be a major life activity. So, individual, case by case determinations should be made and must be made. The following are the examples that Congress has provided of major life activities: caring for oneself is a major life activity, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, communicating, breathing, standing, lifting, speaking, reading, learning, concentrating, thinking, working, bending are all listed as major life activities. Some. Note that learning is on the list of major life activities. However, Section 504 does not require that the child's educational performance be adversely affected. So even if your child is getting good grades, he or she may qualify for a 504 plan if he or she is substantially limited in some other major life activity at school. Having good grades does not make the determination. Okay. Overall, Section 504 covers a much broader range of students with disabilities than the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as the IDEA, which governs IEPs. Therefore, a child may qualify for a 504 plan, but not qualify for an IEP. Well, who determines eligibility? I'm glad you asked. That would be the SBLC, and we will discuss this more in depth. According to the Louisiana State Bulletin 1508, which is the Pupil Appraisal Handbook, the School Building Level Committee, known as the SBLC, is a general education, data-driven, decision-making committee whose standing members consist of at least the principal or designee, a classroom teacher, and the referring teacher. In discussing an individual student's difficulties, the student's parents or guardians are an invited participant. The SBLC, School Building Level Committee, shall review and analyze all screening data, including response to intervention results, to determine the most beneficial option for the student. The committee's outcome options may include, but are not limited to, one of the following actions: conduct no further action at this time, continue current intervention and progress monitoring through the RTI process, conduct additional interventions through the RTI process, and I will discuss this process further on the next slide. Refer the student to the appropriate committee to conduct a Section 504 evaluation. Refer the student to pupil appraisal personnel for support services, or refer the student to pupil appraisal personnel for an individual evaluation if an exceptionality is suspected. A student may be referred to the SBLC, School Building Level Committee, whenever a member of the instructional team feels there is a need for additional support or services to meet a student's academic, behavioral, or health needs. And parents can make this call as well for help. The referring teacher will conduct a parent-teacher conference to discuss concerns regarding the student and document parental response. The referring teacher will request a SBLC meeting using the SBLC referral form for any student consistently struggling or having difficulty making expected progress. And again, this is academic, behavioral, and health needs. After receiving the referral from the teacher, the chairperson speaks with the student's parents regarding the referral and asks if the parents would like to attend a committee meeting. Now, I hope you all know the answer is always yes. Though parents are not required to attend these meetings, when invited, you should. Okay? All right. The SBLC chairperson will notify committee members of scheduled meeting within 10 working days. Students with an exceptionality can be referred to SBLC when there are new concerns that cannot be properly managed through his or her IEP. That goes into how students can have an IEP and a 504. For example, a student with an exceptionality of speech or language impairment, which is communication, that exhibits characteristics of a gifted or talented academic need, student must be referred to SBLC to address those new concerns. Also, a student with an exceptionality of speech or language impairment that presents with academic deficits could also be referred to SBLC. Discussion of promotion of the student is another time the SBLC would meet to review an exceptional student's progress. Some students referred for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. Evaluations who do not meet that criteria, again, may qualify for services under Section 504. Okay, so I want to take a moment before moving forward, because I've mentioned RTI, response to intervention, but what does response to intervention mean exactly? Well, RTI is a structured, multi-tiered approach to help identify and support struggling students. The RTI process begins with high quality instruction and universal screening of all children in the general education classroom. Struggling learners are provided with interventions at increasing levels of intensity to accelerate their rate of learning. These services may be provided by a variety of personnel, including general education teachers, special educators, and specialists. Progress is closely monitored to assess both learning rate and level of performance of individual students. Educational decisions about the intensity and duration of interventions are based on individual student response to instruction. RTI, response to intervention, is designed for use when making decisions in both general education and special education, creating a well-integrated system of instruction and intervention guided by child outcome data. Essentially, RTI is part of the broader multi-tiered systems of support framework. During the pre-referral process, screening, which is not considered a special education evaluation according to Bulletin 1508, may be performed to determine appropriate strategies for curriculum implementation. The discussion of strategies, implementation of interventions, and data is collected to assist with the student's educational success. Implementation of targeted interventions through the RTI process with data collection is critical to identifying necessary supports for addressing student needs. The essential component of RTI, response to intervention, include high quality, scientifically based classroom instruction, ongoing student assessment, tiered instruction, and parent involvement. RTI is generally referred to as a three-tiered model. High quality classroom instruction, that's screening and group interventions with Tier 1. With Tier 1, all students receive high quality, scientifically based instruction provided by qualified personnel to ensure that their difficulties are not due to inadequate instruction. Tier 2 are targeted interventions. Students not making adequate progress in the regular classroom in Tier 1 are provided with increasingly intensive instruction. Increasingly intensive instruction matched to their needs on the basis of levels of performance and rates of progress. Intensity varies across group size, frequency, and duration of intervention, and level of training of the professionals providing instruction or intervention. These interventions are usually in the areas of reading and math. Students who continue to show too little progress in Tier 1 and Tier 2 at this level of intervention are then considered for more intensive interventions as part of Tier 3. A Tier 3 is your intensive interventions and comprehensive evaluation. At this level, students receive individualized, intensive interventions that target the student's skill deficits. Students who do not achieve the desired level of progress in response to these targeted interventions are then referred for a comprehensive evaluation and considered for eligibility for special education services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as, you got it, IDEA. The data collected during these 3 tiers are included and used to make the eligibility decision. That was a mouthful. All right, so now that we all have a better understanding of RTI, which I hope, we'll continue on with determining process for a 504 plan. The determination of appropriate accommodations must be made by a group of persons knowledgeable about the student. Not just knowledgeable, but knowledgeable about the student. That includes you. Yes, you, the parent. So let's discuss those procedures and what to expect. The SBLC committee will conduct meetings during the eligibility process. And those meetings will consist of the SBLC meeting number 1, and that is where the referring teacher or person presents information to the SBLC committee with supporting documentation, includes student work samples, documentation of previously tried interventions, documentation of communication with the parents about concerns, and the results of the communications. Response to intervention data is reviewed as well. The SBLC committee analyzes and reviews information presented. Parents provide input and parental information to the medical information is reviewed if provided. So bring it all to the table, parents. Any of the screener checklist, which if you would like to have, I will send via email, may be completed by the teacher prior to the SBLC meeting without parental consent. Now, a screener that requires direct assessment of the student requires parental consent. And parental consent, if not already obtained, is obtained for screening, medical, dyslexia, speech, and etc. The committee plans the initial steps in assisting the student, supplemental instruction, new interventions, conducting screenings, and etc. The committee schedules a follow-up meeting as needed and documented on the SBLC meeting summary form, which will prompt, after doing all this, gathering the information, analyzing, this will prompt the SBLC meeting number 2. And at this meeting, the SBLC will review the information from the SBLC meeting, the first meeting, and the committee will confirm and complete all required parts on initial referral form. The teacher presents intervention documentation data to include all of the students' work samples, daily logs, graphs, and charts. SBLC reviews the referral and intervention data to inform recommendation. If a referral for an initial evaluation, pupil appraisal will obtain parental permission and provide the parents with a copy of the Louisiana Education's Rights booklet. Also, if dyslexia is the suspected disability, the appropriate school site personnel will use the dyslexia assessment in accordance with Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators. All students in kindergarten through 3rd grade shall be administered an early literacy screener within the first 30 days of the school year. Through the outline screening process, students demonstrating deficits in both categories defined by Bulletin 1508, Louisiana's Handbook for Students with Dyslexia, will be further reviewed through district evaluation procedures. All right, so if the committee determines that the student has a disability, then they will analyze the data to determine if there is a substantial limitation of one of the major life activities. Under both federal laws, IDEA and Section 504, the mere existence of a disability does not create program eligibility. Instead, the disability must rise to the level of severity or impact on the student's performance at school. When the Section 504 assessment has been completed, the parents are notified of the meeting to determine if the student is eligible. So just because they have a disability does not qualify them or make them eligible. Again, that disability has to rise to the level of severity or impact on the student's performance at school. Now, if the student is eligible under Section 504, they are to be determined the need of accommodations. If the student is eligible for Section 504 services, an IAP, not to be confused with an IEP, an IAP will be created, and they will document the SBLC meeting on the SBLC meeting summary form. Once the committee determines that a student meets 504 eligibility, an individual accommodation plan, IAP, must be developed. The IAP must be used for providing documentation of accommodations on a written plan for students who need Section 504 accommodations and who may or may not need standardized testing accommodations. Parents must be invited to all IAP meetings. What did you say? Repeat that? Okay. Parents must be invited to all, not some, all IAP meetings. Students should promptly begin receiving the appropriate accommodations once the IAP has been developed. Every child who is eligible for Section 504 services must have a current IAP on file, even if testing or classroom accommodations are not necessary. The disability, support data, and any protections received by the student must be documented on the IAP. The student's accommodations should be specific to the student's disability. The IAP must indicate accommodations that will be routinely provided in the classroom setting. Routinely provided in the classroom setting. Also, the IAP should show consistency between standardized test accommodations needed and those accommodations routinely provided in the classroom. IAP accommodations typically are grouped by environment, that's small group, preferential seating, minimize distractions, allow students to move, and etc. Instructional strategies such as tests read aloud, verbal and visual cues to reinforce instruction, copies of notes to accompany instruction, break tasks into less complex chunks, and etc. Material, where we alter the format, change font, enlarge print, increase white space on the page, lineless paper, special writing utensils, use of highlighters, use of electronic speller, and the list goes on. Time demands, provide timeless for task completion, extended time, allow breaks between tasks. Upon agreement to conditions of the IAP, all committee members present at the meeting should sign the IAP. If a committee member does not agree, he or she may indicate with a note and signature on the IAP with a memorandum for the record that is later attached to the IAP. IAPs must be updated on a yearly basis. This will occur at the beginning of the school year to address the student's current grade level, curriculum and state standardized assessment, and whenever adjustments or changes warranted. Educational changes that are new should not be made without the parental consent. Renewal of services may continue once the services have been established initially, and a copy of all evaluation data must be filed within the student's folder. The student Section 504 evaluation determination of eligibility form is good for 3 years. And parents will be invited to a Section 504 reevaluation by a Section 504 letter of prior notice, and the IAP will be updated annually with a Section 504 annual review of individual accommodation plan form. All right, let their success begin. The benefits of a 504 plan are multiple and varied. And now that your child has a 504 plan, it's important to stay actively involved in their education, which I'm sure you are already doing that, but actively involved by regularly communicating with their teachers, monitoring their progress, and ensuring the accommodations outlined in the plan are being implemented consistently. You should always make sure your child understands their 504 plan and knows how to advocate for themselves when needed. And if you believe your child may benefit from a 504 plan, always reach out to your school's designated 504 coordinator to initiate the process. Remember, every student deserves an equal chance to succeed, and the 504 plan can help make that possible. Make a referral to the school if you think your child needs a 504 plan. Make this referral in writing. And I tell my parents so often, As we should know by now, if it wasn't in writing, it did not happen. Tell the principal the reasons why your child should be evaluated. You will also want to send a copy of your letter to the special education coordinator for the school district if necessary. Accommodations do not reduce learning expectations. When a change in the instruction or assessment actively lowers the expectations for student learning, it is considered a modification. And I just wanted to share a little bit on accommodations and modifications. Accommodations are an important part of effective educational programs for students with disabilities. Many students with disabilities need one small change in the way they are instructed and tested to participate successfully in general education classes. Accommodations involve the use of different strategies, assistive technology, changes in the schedule or environment, or support from a person to increase, maintain, or improve the performance of a student with a disability. So an accommodation, that changes how a student learns the material. And I've provided a few examples here. Modification changes what the student is taught or expected to learn. An accommodation allows a student to complete the same assignments as other students, but permits a change in the timing, formatting, setting, scheduling, response, or presentation. An accommodation does not alter what the test or assignment measures. For example, examples of accommodations are here, and that includes what a student who is blind taking Braille, a version of that test would be needed. So there's a host of accommodations and modifications, and modifications simply change what, and that could be simplified instruction, chunking the information, different homework or test questions to help them to be successful in the classroom. So I just wanted to provide you with that to give a bit of understanding on the difference. Okay, disputes and disagreements. In the event, which we hope not, the objective is to smooth sail through and be successful on all sides. But in the event a parent or guardian wishes to contest an action of the district regarding your child's identification, evaluation, or placement under 504, you have the right to an impartial due process hearing. There are protections under Section 504. You have the right to participate personally at the hearing and to be presented by an attorney if you wish to hire one. If you wish to contest an action taken by the 504 committee by means of an impartial due process hearing, you must submit a notice of appeal or request for hearing to the district's 504 coordinator. And we hope to be able, and I'm sure schools are too, to handle that on a school level, because sometimes it's just as simple as a miscommunication or lack of communication, misunderstanding. But you also have a right to present a grievance or complaint through the district's local grievance process. The district will investigate the situation, take into account the nature of the complaint and all necessary factors, and respond appropriately to you within a reasonable time. Parents may contact the district's Section 504 coordinator for more information about the district's grievance process. And you should, because that's how we keep our system strong. Again, these procedural safeguards are checks and balances. Our systems will never know what we need if we don't communicate that. And we will never, our systems won't know how well they're doing or what in addition can be done if we don't let them know. So the Office of Civil Rights monitors this federal law. And at any time, a parent may file a complaint with OCR, but again, we hope to handle that on the school level. Under Section 504, school districts are required to develop and implement a system of procedural safeguards to address FAPE. We always want to provide a free, appropriate public education, and those concerns can be addressed here specifically, such as the identification, again, evaluation, and educational placement of students with disabilities. Procedural safeguards include notice and opportunity for records review by parents, and the list goes on. An OCR complaint is a formal complaint filed with the U.S. Department of Education's, and that would be Louisiana Department of Office for Civil Rights. These complaints typically address allegations of discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex, disability, or age in programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. But for our parents of special needs children, an OCR complaint might be filed if they believe their child's rights under federal laws, such as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, have been violated. And these laws require schools that receive federal funding to provide appropriate accommodations and services to students with disabilities. That's always the goal and always the focus. And we have to work together because we are a team. All right. So let's review just a few important takeaways. Section 504 is a broad civil rights law. The law applies to students and other individuals with disabilities, parents, and also school district employees. And the purpose is to protect individuals with disabilities. The purpose is to protect individuals with disabilities from harassment, bullying, and the list goes on. A 504 plan is a different method for students with disabilities to get the supports they need in general education. You have to look at it, we're not changing the general education, but we want to provide those supports that they may need to benefit. It's a blueprint for how the school can provide supports and remove those barriers for a student with a disability. And students who may not qualify for an IEP may get the supports and accommodations they need through the 504 plan. An IEP falls under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. A 504 plan is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Both are federal laws. Section 504 defines an individual with a disability broadly as any person who has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more of such person's major life activities, has a record of an impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. Though parents are not required to attend those SBLC meetings, you should when invited. And if you believe that your child may benefit from a 504 plan, reach out to your school's designated 504 coordinator to initiate the process. SBLC is School Building Level Committee. It is on a school building level. It is not special education. So we've given you a lot of information, good information, I hope, in this webinar. And if you are new to this process, you may feel overwhelmed because there's so much information. But we have recorded this training and we'll provide it to you on our YouTube page. So if you follow us on YouTube, there you go. It's important to know that most parents feel exactly how you do. I know I've been in your seat. It can be overwhelming. But typically you become more confident the more you learn, right? Knowledge is key. And that is why we provide these webinars, these trainings, this information to you at no cost to you. How great is that? It may be helpful to take, and yes, it can be overwhelming. But that's okay. You'll have this to watch over and over again and to take all this information in. We know that this is a journey and it takes time for it to seep in and to make sense as we go through these processes. But the goal is to activate you, to inform you, to make you aware of what protections you have, what the process is, that it's not that cut and dry. If your kids have good grades, that's not enough. So when you know that something is wrong, seek and find why. It may be helpful and will be helpful to continue to take our Families Helping Families webinars. And Miss Esther does such a wonderful job with our trainings. They break down one aspect of the education system at a time. So check out our trainings calendar. Get on our website at Families Helping Families, FHF, region7.com. Follow us because we provide so much on IEPs, related services, tests and assessments, accommodations versus modifications, and other similar topics. And of course, you can always call us anytime to find support from peer or get help with your child's educational issues. Thank you. My executive director is so awesome. She just put all that in the group chat in the box. I saw that. I'm playing. Okay. So thank you, Chanel, for sharing our information. Additional Families Helping Families, Region 7 support. If you need additional support, when you need additional support on special education services, know that we are here for you. You should contact us at 318-226-4541 or 1-877-226-4541. That is our toll-free number. And you may also email us here. And so I've provided my information. You have my email address. You have our website. Get on Facebook. We share so much good information on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube and such. And get in those groups. All right. So now is the time that I need you the most. Evaluation. At the end of this training, the evaluation will pop up. Okay. So we use this information to continuously improve checks and balances. We know how well we're doing when you fill out this survey. So please complete the evaluation for me, please, and thank you. When this concludes, everyone who registered and complete the evaluation will receive a certificate of attendance. Okay, questions. Did we have any questions?
I did not see any questions in the chat, Zandra, but if anyone has any questions at this time, you are more than welcome to put your question in the chat or raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask your question.
Well,
I don't see,
if you have any questions, I'm sorry.
I said, I don't see any hands raised
Okay,
or anything in the
good
chat.
deal. Well, that means we did a good job. So if you think of questions, when you think of questions, again, my name is Andrea Ashley. I'm one of the education specialists with Families Helping Families Region 7. Our number is 318-226-4541, and there's my email address. And if you think of any questions that you can't think of right now, that you don't want to discuss right now, you'd rather talk face to face, you can call and register for our chat and chew that we are having January 23rd. Myself and Miss Esther will be there to sit with our parents and enjoy a bite to eat over some good conversation. We're taking this opportunity to hear your needs and concerns and praise. It is through communication that we are able to better serve our families. So come join us, call an RSVP. We would be happy to see you there. Also, go ahead and register for our upcoming training that Miss Esther will be doing on navigating the IEP Part 1. This is our first session in our 4-part series of navigating the IEP. It is an amazing training that you won't want to miss. So you can scan the QR code right there. You can give us a call, but go ahead and register for this training that will be February 6th at 11 a.m. And we have navigating the IEP Part 1, Part 2, 3, and 4 that we will be having those trainings throughout the year. Okay, I want to thank you all for attending Understanding the 504 and More. I hope it provided a lot of insight for you. If you are feeling overwhelmed, that is okay. You will be at ease the more you take our trainings and call us because we are here for you. And the information in this presentation, including but not limited to PowerPoint handouts and presenters' comments, is not legal advice. We advise you to consult with legal counsel to determine how this information may apply to your specific facts and circumstances. But this is who we are and what we do, and we thank you. Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.